An important part of the fire conversations is that you result in a group of people that know and trust each other and have a common interest with fire and their community. And so when those responsible for emergency management planning wanted to explore the idea of evacuation with community residents and came up with the idea of a simulation to explore this concept, the majority of the participants at this workshop were members of the Aries Inlet Fire Conversation. So this particular event was innovative on at least 3 levels. It introduced the topic of evacuation to the community. It used a scenario to explore the concept, and the scenario event was structured to maximize resident conversations. CFA and police set out their respective roles in emergency management and defined evacuation. An advantage of the simulation process is that it allowed agency staff to genuinely connect with participants. We recorded people's questions concerning evacuation. It was anticipated that the simulation and the conversations generated would answer most questions. We outlined how the scenario would be run. It would be divided into 4 time periods, and at each time we would ask participants to indicate where they would be, what they would have with them, and what they might be thinking. So the scene setting for the first part was to ask participants to imagine that it was the Friday before the Australia Day long weekend, with predictions for a bit of a heat wave. Now, after setting the scene for Friday night, we asked participants to indicate where they would be. The act of placing a sticker dot on the map helped people to ground the experience. This was then repeated for the Saturday morning. Now, one of the emerging aha moments at this time was when it was realised that on a day like this, many of the emergency service personnel would not be in Aries at all, but at the Geelong Incident Control Centre. Saturday lunchtime. A little puff of smoke on the horizon. At this point, it was explained that there would be warning messages and that the police would enact their traffic management plan, which would mean setting up roadblocks. One of the advantages of the process is that it made the theory real. It promoted discussion around whether or not people would be allowed out of the town as well as in. It generated discussion about the numbers of tourists. It brought home the fact that there would actually only be 8 police staff in the district. And then came Saturday afternoon. The Phoenix modelling tool was introduced. The lead-in time, the process of participants having to consider where they'd be at a given point in the scenario, all helped focus their attention into really feeling about what it might be like at that moment. Finally, we checked to see that all questions had been answered. This is where the learning really occurred. It brought out some interesting illustrations of the very varied understandings of fire safety. After the event, there were a number of debrief sessions. These reinforced 2 concepts. The first is that people learn through experience. And in this instance, the simulation provided an experiential event that enabled people to converse and talk with each other. And the second one is that in an uncertain world where extreme events become the norm, the resilient communities will be those where people can think and act for themselves, but at the same time have the awareness and self-confidence to help look after each other. These 2 facets of development, that is individual learning and the idea of mutuality, are the outcomes of fire conversations.